ready to do it?
Yep.
All right, Martha, here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. I'm very excited to have as my guest today, Dr. Martha Beck. Dr. Beck, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So Dr. Beck has spent a lifetime offering powerful, practical, and entertaining advice that helps people improve every aspect of their lives. Her written work includes several New York Times and international bestsellers, as well as over 150 magazine articles. For the past 18 years, Dr. Beck has been a monthly columnist at the Oprah Magazine. She earned her BA, MA, and Ph.D. degrees from Harvard, all in social sciences. For over 2 decades, she has been, in the words of USA Today, one of the best-known life coaches in America. Martha, welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Before we get going, share with the listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Yes, I grew up in Utah and left there at 17 to go off to Harvard, which was quite a culture shock. And I presently live in Pennsylvania, near the place where Washington crossed the Delaware that Christmas morning.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So look, I mean, how did all this start for you? And when I say this, I mean this quest, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this quest, this thirst for living our heart, living our purpose.
Well, it's strange. When you grow up in a very intense religion, I was raised very Mormon, and it's what's called a life world religion. Like it filters into every aspect of your daily life. And they're always telling you what's true and how to be happy. And for me, it never worked. But I was constantly confronted with the issues, life mission, eternal happiness, all this stuff. And I thought I should be feeling this, and I am not. And then I just got more and more anxious and depressed as I went into adolescence, and then started to figure things out when I was a young adult. And by that time, I was teaching business school. And I tried to find ways to make my own life happier. And this kind of filtered into my teaching. And my business school students would come to my office, and they never wanted to talk about international business management, which is what I was teaching. They wanted to talk about their lives and about how their lives could serve them, which was kind of my obsession. So I started just talking to them outside of class. And the next thing I knew, I was reading in the newspaper that I was a life coach.
Wait, okay,
Never heard of it.
hang on. So wait a minute. So you jumped from adolescent angst to teaching business school. How did you get into teaching business school? What happened there?
So I also grew up in a family of intellectuals. My father was a very prominent intellectual in the Mormon community. And because of that, I was very high achieving, and I did go off to Harvard when I was 17 and just sort of stayed there. The first degree from Harvard did not make me feel good, so I figured I needed more. And so I just kept going to Harvard like an addiction, and gradually got my PhD and started, went off to be an assistant professor. In the meantime, I'd married, I had 3 children, and my second child was prenatally diagnosed with Down syndrome late in the pregnancy. And that really brought me to a decision point. Literally, I had like 2 weeks legally to end the pregnancy or continue it to make that decision. And although I'm very pro-choice, despite my Mormon background, by that time I wasn't a good Mormon. Now I'm not Mormon at all. But I already loved this child, and I was thinking, what is the criterion on which I judge the validity of a human life? Because everyone told me, the 5 doctors at the Harvard Medical School who did obstetrics told me it was like having a malignant tumor, that they had to take it out, that it would ruin my life, this little baby. And I remembered thinking, but I already loved this child. I was very, very bonded with him. I'd seen him sucking his finger on the ultrasound. It was a hard pregnancy. I'd had trouble keeping him alive. And I just walked around thinking, what makes us decide that one life is worth living and one isn't? And I decided that my criterion for a life worth living was a life that contained joy. And I looked around me at all the people at Harvard, the students, the professors, and I did not see much joy. But I had heard that people with Down syndrome could experience joy. So I thought, let's do this thing. Let's find out what life is like if you live it for joy and for love instead of for achievement. So that really turned me around. But I kept getting the degrees and finished them out, but it made me think really
Mm.
differently. And that's what came out in my teaching once I became an assistant professor.
What was it that kind of invited these students to talk not about international business, but about their lives? What was it in you, do you think?
Well, I remember thinking, they would talk about how do I get a job? And I'd say, well, if you don't like it, don't do it. And they'd be like, wait, what? Go back. Like and I would say, if something makes you happy, maybe you could do more of that. And if it makes you unhappy, perhaps choose to do less of it. And they would just be like, no one has ever said these things to me. They hadn't. These were high achieving business school students, and they had been living the no pain, no gain principle their whole young lives. And here I was saying, if you're not having fun, don't do it. You got your wild and precious life. You don't get to do this again. Go for
Mm.
the gusto. And that was blowing their minds.
Wow. So with that, what did you feel when you were doing that, when they were responding that way?
Well, I'd been through a few more things. I developed a lot of autoimmune diseases in my young adult life. And so I'd had a lot of limitation and a lot of chronic pain. I was almost always in pain. And in order to lessen the stress on my system, I did much more selecting things based on whether or not they brought me happiness than I think most other people did. So when I was up there talking to these students and when they'd come to my office, what I'd see as they said, wait, like I remember a Chinese student coming in and he was the one child allowed by his huge extended family. The government was doing the one child policy. And he always smiled, always. But through this huge smile, he told me he was thinking of taking his own life because he had never been happy and couldn't stand pretending anymore.
Mm.
And because he was everything to his family and he had to be happy. And I would look at students who were much less under much less stress than that, or I would look at people who were under even more stress, and I would think, oh my God, we're all so lost.
Mhm.
We are so lost. How did we go off away from our nature so dramatically? We're designed to find joy and purpose in this life. And here are all these kids and adults, they were young adults, and they've forgotten how to feel. Meanwhile, I had this kid at home, this child with Down syndrome, who always did exactly what was in his whole integrity.
Mm.
And if he didn't want to do it, I took him to learn martial arts so that when kids made fun of him, he could beat them up. And he said, we got to the martial arts place and he goes, why would I want to hit anyone? No, I'm not going to hit anyone. No, no. So I realized that I wanted to hit people who made fun of him. So I took him home, went back and signed up myself and spent 8 years doing martial arts.
Oh my God.
Never beat anybody up, but it was nice knowing I could. Anyway, I just kept seeing how over and over the various cultures in which we grow up, in which we're socialized, pull us away from our true nature and make us go numb to our own feelings. And that getting back home was as simple as tuning back in to the body, to the heart, to the soul, and allowing ourselves to go in the direction that they were calling us.
I want to thank you for that honest reflection on it was you who was feeling angry. I mean, I think a lot of us can really relate to that. Um, just as an aside, what martial art did you study?
It was called Chen Tai. It's a Chinese soft. I tried different things. I tried like Taekwondo, which is very like chopping things with an axe. And Chen Tai is more like brushing things with a silk scarf. Like something that's a hit like that in Taekwondo is this in
Yeah,
Chen Tai.
yeah.
So it's really fun, very confidence inducing. I highly recommend it. Do you
What
do
what
martial arts?
actually studied Taekwondo for a long time
Oh
when I
yeah,
was
so
younger. Yeah. And then that your description is very apt, like an axe.
yeah,
But
it's brilliant.
what you're talking about here, I mean, it kind of leads us right into your book, The Way of Integrity.
Mm, yeah.
And how did this book come about?
Well, when I was when I was 29, you're going to hear the whole nine yards here. I was probably at maximum misery. I had three little kids under four. I was trying to finish my degree. I was sick and in pain all the time. I was already teaching. My husband at the time traveled all around the world, so I was often by myself. And when I was 29, I just was so stressed out and so unhappy that my body kind of fell apart. And I also had some trauma in my background that started to surface at that time. And one day things got so bad that I was rushed into an emergency surgery. And during the surgery, I had one of those experiences that people report with near death. I was not near death, but it was pretty inexplicable because during this surgery, I became aware and looked around the room and thought, that's strange because I think my eyes are closed. And then I sat up. That's really strange because I know I'm lying down. And I kind of watched the surgeons working on me,
Oh,
and
wow.
it was like, huh. And I lay back down. I didn't know what to do. And then between the surgical lights, I saw this ball of light appear. And it was unbelievably bright and incredibly, incredibly beautiful. And it kind of grew. And when it touched me, I felt this unbelievable warmth and love and peace and home. And I just melted into it. And it said, well, it kind of communicated without words. Um, you're okay. You're home. This is who you've always been. This is what you've forgotten. And I was laughing, thinking, how could I mean, I wasn't laughing in my body, but my mind was laughing and saying, I can't believe I forgot that this is what we actually are. The feeling was so exquisite. And this light said to me, look, I'm always there with everybody, even though you can't see me. And you're not supposed to wait until you're dead to feel
Mhm.
this sensation of absolute peace, bliss, joy. You're supposed to learn to feel this way while you're alive. And that's your job for the rest of your life. So I was 29. I came out of that surgery and I just started doing everything that felt more like being with that light. If something felt less like the light, I would not do it. I would just stop dead in my tracks and turn. And if it felt more like the light, I would go toward it no matter what people thought. So one of the things I did was decide that I was not going to tell any lies for a full year, not a single lie, because they told me the truth would set me free. And I thought, okay, if it gets me toward that line, I'm going. So I didn't tell a lie for a whole year. And during that year, I left my religion, my family of origin, my job, my marriage started. I realized I was gay, so that went away. I left my industry, I left my job, I left everything except my children. Really, I left my home.
Wow. So in other words, you also didn't live a lie, right? It's not that
No,
you
no,
right,
yeah, I tried to live. It's hard to live a lie if you're not telling any lies.
right.
But I called this my integrity cleanse. At first, it was just verbal. Since then, I've taken many, many, many integrity cleanses, and they grew and developed to the point where even a facial expression that is deceptive or it doesn't reflect what I'm really feeling feels like a lie. So it got more scrupulous over the years, but just not saying any lies basically threw my whole life into a great big bonfire
Wow.
and set me free. It was really true. The truth set me free. But as a, oh, David Foster Wallace says, the truth will set you free, but not until it's had its way with you. And it did. But it got me closer to the feeling of that light. And my depression went away, and much of my physical pain went away, and a new way of living arose, and a new way of making a living arose. And the rest is, well, what you said in the introduction.
Wow. So in a sense, that decision to not tell any lies, not live any lies was kind of like your North Star? It was really simple. I mean, if this was bringing you this action was not bringing you joy, nope. It
Yeah.
was kind of
Yeah. Due north all the
right,
time.
right.
And after I started, I wanted to write one book. I wanted to write a book about my son and about the meaning of life and how he taught it to me. So I did that and it succeeded. And I didn't know that if you write a book that is a bestseller, they come and ask you what you're going to write next. I was like, well, I'm not a writer. I just have one book. And my editor said, well, what are you doing? And I said, I spend all my time with these students. I'm telling them all these things about life. And she said, well, write that down. So that was my first self-help book, and I called it Finding Your Own North Star. And I was thinking about that light that I'd seen in the surgery, but really I think that's within all of us all the time. And the truth takes us to it. And I ended up writing several self-help books, and the most recent is called The Way of Integrity, meaning integrity just means being whole and undivided. And
And what does
that's
that mean? What does that mean?
Well, I've been talking about how we follow our socialization away from our true nature. Basically, every baby is born knowing exactly the truth about his or her or their own life, right? They know what they are. Before we can even speak, we start to notice that certain actions are reinforced in different ways by the people around us, negatively, positively. And before we can even talk, we sell ourselves out hard to go and do what people want, right? Because we have to survive. So my little Chinese student started smiling instead of crying when he was tiny. By the
Mm,
time I met him, he didn't remember what it felt like to be genuinely happy. He'd been divided from himself for so long that his mind was stuck in a socialized compartment that didn't even communicate with what he was really feeling. So he was not in integrity, he was in duplicity. And that's not because he was a bad person, it's because he was
right.
a good person. He was trying so hard to be good. But to get integrity, get our integrity back, we have to stop selling out our true nature. We have to know what we really feel. And well, as I said in the book, know what you really know, feel what you really feel, say what you really mean, and do what you really want. It's radical.
So I want to dial in on this because this is really inspiring for me because I feel like I could use a good, I mean, I'm sure many of us could, but I could use a really hefty dose of this. Break this down. What might this look like for me in the morning?
Okay. The first question I always ask, when I'm speaking to large groups, I'll stop right in the middle of a speech and say, just a second, I just want to check and make sure everyone's comfortable, physically comfortable. Are you comfortable? And then the audience looks kind of nervous and they're like, yeah, we're fine. And I'm like, no, tell me, are you really comfortable? And they're like, yes, just talk. So then I say, if you were home alone right now, how many of you would be sitting in exactly the position you're in at this moment? And no one raises a hand. And then I say, why not? And they sit and think, and it's actually, these are brilliant people and they have to really ponder this. And then they're like, oh, it's not really all that comfortable. And that, I tell them, is not a problem. We can tolerate huge discomfort. We're brave, we're hardy. Good. But they all looked at me in clear daylight and lied to my face and said they were comfortable while knowing they weren't comfortable at another level. So the first question I would ask you is, right now, sitting in your chair, wherever you are in the world, and also situated in your relationships, in your profession, and all the things that you do every day, are you comfortable?
No.
Wow, that's profound.
I mean, on the continuum of hell yes to hell no, it's more hell no.
Oh, wow. So then you start saying, okay, I always tell coaches when I train them, just find the place of least satisfaction because that's the place where we can often create the biggest positive change. So you just say, what part of your life is most uncomfortable? And you don't have to say it right now here, but
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I won't get into it, but right.
Sure. And for some people it's a relationship, for some people it's their job, for some people it's the place they're living, but whatever's
We're
most
all three.
uncomfortable. All three. Yeah, a lot of people don't have anything in their lives that's really comfortable. So you start like altering course in the way of integrity. I call it making 1-degree turns.
Mhm.
So if you're on an airplane and you turn the plane half a degree or a degree north every 15 minutes or so, you won't even notice the plane turning. But over time, you're going to end up in a completely different place. So you find the place where you're most uncomfortable and you make whatever little shift you can to be more comfortable. It's not really complex. And you take these tiny little steps and your life starts going in a very different direction. And one day, the tiny little step you take might be jumping off a cliff. It might be, okay, this marriage is over, or I'm moving. This is, whatever big
Mhm.
binary changes. I'm going to have a baby. I'm going to buy a dog, whatever it is. Um, and it's a big step, but it's a little step. It's been based on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tiny course adjustments until you're sure you know that this is the next place that will make you more comfortable, more joyful, more purposeful. And you just keep doing it.
When you were doing this, I mean, there's no doubt this is somewhat simple, but it ain't
Mhm.
easy.
No,
It's
you're
and it
exactly
takes
right.
a lot of friggin' courage to do this,
Yeah.
right?
They,
Because we have to look at ourselves and what the hell we're doing. And
yeah.
when you were doing this, I'm sure there were moments or periods of time or actions that you were thinking about taking and didn't want to take, where you were like, I don't know if I
Yes.
can do this. Can you
Oh,
share
yeah.
one of those?
Well, I wrote a book about leaving Mormonism and about my family a little bit, and the strangeness of my childhood because my father was the foremost defender, intellectual defender of Mormonism, but he also did a lot of things that were not moral. And I mean, I think he was trying his best, but his best was really wrong. Not great. Anyway, it influenced not only my family, but the entire religion. And I waited 10 years between the thinking I really need to tell this to the world
Mm,
and actually doing it. And by the time I did it, I mean, if you're raised around religious zealots, they can get pretty scary. So by the time I was ready to write it, I tripled my life insurance. I tried to make sure my kids were taken care of because I was fairly certain I would be killed.
oh my
And
gosh.
I got a lot of death threats when the book, when the galleys were released. And I at one point I had 5 lawyers and 2 detectives trying to keep up with all the craziness, and I didn't have that kind of money to be paying these people. So I knew it would be um, a big deal, and I thought I might not live through it. But I also knew that if I had not said anything, I would have talk about not comfortable. I would have been doing violence to my integrity, to my psyche, to my soul. I couldn't not do it, but it took a long time to get the courage to do it.
Why? I mean, as we kind of wind down here, why? And this seems like a simple question, but why are we not living in integrity?
2 reasons, and you are all over both of them. The first one is trauma. Things happen to us that are very painful, and we associate those with various things that happen to us, and then we're afraid of those things, and it keeps us from following our joy because we're too busy avoiding pain. But I would say by far the biggest reason is not trauma, but simply socialization. We're taught what people want us to be. And we want so much to be loved and included that we are willing to leave ourselves to be with the people around us, to connect with the people around us, which is ironic because many of them are divorced from their own integrity, and everybody's living a kind of socialized dance that has nothing to do with the truth of their hearts and souls.
Mm.
So yeah, we're all doing that dance, and there's really not much point in it when you start to sit and think this is your one wild and precious life. What do you want? How do you want to spend it?
You know, it's interesting that I'm talking to you right now because yes, this book, this podcast is, the trauma therapist, whatever, but so much of what I've learned in doing this is the importance of integrity, the importance
Hmm.
of authenticity, and how
Yeah.
so very challenging it is for us to for many of us, right?
Yeah.
To live that.
Yep.
And when I hear you talk, I'm like, it's so inspiring, and I can't, I mean, I sound like some cliched podcast host, but I can't wait to go get this book because I seriously, I'm like sick of, just following along and not
Yeah.
feeling that joy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing is we have one great unfailing ally, and its name is suffering. If we do not live in our structural integrity, like a plane needs to be in structural integrity to fly. It's not about morality, it's just about how things work. If we don't live in our own integrity, we suffer. Things feel terrible. First, our moods, and then our bodies break down, then our relationships and our ability to focus mentally. Everything breaks down to say, stop. Go back to the place where you knew what was comfortable and what wasn't, what brought you joy and what didn't, and choose your joy this time. And then the suffering will go away and say, that's exactly what I wanted. And you'll say, thank you so much, suffering, for forcing me to do this.
Martha, I'm so glad you came on this podcast today. How do people get in touch with you? What's the best way?
MarthaBeck.com. I have a
Okay.
website. I don't usually go there. Don't know what it's like, but good people mind it. And you can find me through that.
We'll have it linked up here at the show notes page.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure meeting you. Really so friggin' inspiring, and you're welcome back anytime.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. Keep doing your wonderful, wonderful work in the world, and I'd be honored to come back.
Awesome. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.